Revelation 18, we have a description of the end-time city of Babylon that is going to be judged. In verse 4, we have a command apparently being spoken by Yahweh for his people to come out of Babylon. There we read, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues." Now, many believe this is a call for people not necessarily to physically depart from Babylon, but to come out of her in a spiritual sense. That is, Jehovah is basically calling his people to forsake all the sinful practices and ideas and values of Babylon. However, while it's true that our Father does desire his people to resist being conformed to the corrupt ways of Babylon, I don't believe that is the meaning of this particular command. One of the reasons I believe this is because such an interpretation doesn't really harmonize with the language and the point of the text. Consider the fact that one of the reasons Jehovah gives for his people leaving Babylon is that they might not partake of her sins. But if the statement, "Come out of her, my people," basically means don't partake of Babylon's sins, it would seem redundant for Jehovah to then say that ye be not partakers of her sins. To help clarify this, allow me to paraphrase the text that "come out of her, my people" is replaced with "don't partake of the sins of Babylon." The text would basically be implying, don't partake of Babylon's sins so that you are not a partaker of her sins. Again, I would say that is redundant and it doesn't seem to make much sense. What makes more sense is that Jehovah is simply telling his people an action they are to take to help keep them from partaking of Babylon's sins. And certainly one way to refrain from partaking the sins of others is by exercising self-control by the power of the Holy Spirit and refraining from the sin. But another way in which one could avoid partaking in the sins of others is to literally remove yourself from their company and influence. Assume you live in a city where there's a high degree of sin and worldliness and sexual temptation and so forth. If you were to literally leave the city, that would tend to help keep you from partaking in the sins of that city. So I believe it makes more sense to understand this command to flee Babylon as a command to physically depart from the city or nation of Babylon. This is further supported by the second reason Jehovah gives for his people needing to depart from the city. It was so that they would not experience her plagues. Later on in this chapter, Jehovah mentions how the whore will be judged, namely through other nations, through fire. If such a judgment were to fall on the entire nation, then it would seem that the only way to escape such a judgment would be to literally flee the nation. Of course, Yahweh could miraculously protect his people in various ways, much like he protected Daniel's friends in the furnace of fire. However, the Bible makes it pretty clear that the judgment that is to fall upon Babylon is by Yahweh's design and is ultimately his judgment on the nation. And we know that any time Jehovah pours out his judgment on a city or nation, he first ensures that he removes his people. So if Yahweh's judgment is going to fall upon Babylon, it will only occur after all the righteous have been removed. The question is, how will they be removed? Well, it seems they will be removed through them obeying the word of Jehovah by literally leaving the city or the nation. It's similar to the destruction of the temple when those Jews who believed Christ and fled the city were rescued. Likewise, during the tribulation, Christ commands that believers are to flee the holy city to the wilderness, and those who obey and endure to the end will be saved. So it seems that the way in which God's people will be spared from judgment of Babylon is through obedience and taking action and fleeing from the nation, much like Lot was delivered through fleeing Sodom before it was destroyed. Again, I would submit Jehovah is calling his people to literally depart from this end-time nation of Babylon. This conclusion harmonizes with all the passages I cited earlier from the Old Testament where the Jews are commanded to flee Babylon. The language of those texts is not the idea of spiritually coming out of Babylon, but it's the idea of a literal geographical departure.